There's a lot of misconception out there that there are what's known as micro movements or micro responses that tell you whether someone is lying or not. You can't count on those micro gestures. You can't count on being able to apply one rule to all people, especially not one rule to all populations or all ethnicities or all cultures, because every culture is different. In Japan, for example, they don't make eye contact. They look down because that's a sign of respect. So if you try to apply the idea that micro gestures in the United States apply to Japanese people, you're going to think everyone's lying to you, when in fact they're just trying to be respectful, right? So I do not, and I was not taught to accept these micro movements of the face as a form of detecting lies or fabrication. Instead, what we're taught is to use actual communication skills to determine whether someone is lying to you or not. So, for example, if you're talking to somebody that you know very well, let's say it's a brother or a spouse or a coworker, somebody that you have what's known as a baseline about. Baseline means that you've been with this person through many different varieties of emotion, of stress, of time of day, et cetera, et cetera. So you know, in a nutshell, you know what's normal, and then you know what's not normal. When you have a baseline, the way that you can tell whether somebody's lying to you or not is by measuring the variance between how they respond to your question or how they respond in the moment against that baseline. So if you see someone speaking to you and they seem more anxious, if you see someone speaking to you and they seem calmer, if they have a greater variance from the baseline of what you're normally seeing from them, then you know that there's a higher likelihood that you're not getting the complete truth, because their variance from the baseline is significant. When you're talking to somebody who is a complete stranger, you have no baseline when they're a complete stranger. So you can't count on variance from baseline as your tool. Instead, what you have to use is the actual physical words that are coming out of their mouth. So when someone is talking to you and they're a stranger and you want to determine whether or not they're being truthful or not, you have to lean on a set of skills called elicitation. Elicitation is a much more comprehensive set of skills than we can talk about in one interview. But what I will say is this, as some very basic tools. When someone tells you something and you're trying to see whether or not it's truthful or not, the first thing that you can do is just repeat back to them what they said to you later in the conversation. So if somebody said, hey, these windows are going to reduce the amount of solar energy that gets into your house by 25%, some salesperson who's knocking on your door, right? 15 minutes into the conversation, you can ask them, how much will this reduce the solar energy in my house? And if they say 20%, then now you know that they're lying to you. Or if they say 40%, then you know that they're lying to you. Or if you come back and say, you said that these would reduce the amount of solar energy in my house by 35%, right? If they simply just agree with you, again, you can see that they're lying to you, right? So a lot of times, one of the best ways to tell whether a stranger is lying to you or not is by using elicitation techniques. Some of those techniques are repeating what they said back to them, falsely repeating what they said back to them, meaning they said 25%, but you're going to repeat 35%. You're looking for, again, variations in the specific detailed content. Whether we're with baseline, people that you have a baseline on, you're looking for a variance against the baseline. When you don't have a baseline, you're looking for variance against the information. But what you're definitely not doing is looking for micro expressions and micro gestures in the face.
Is there a way to tell if somebody's just legitimately like nervous, like isn't good at having hard conversations versus whether or not they're lying?
No, that's an important thing to understand too, Doug. One of the big reasons why I do not encourage, and I was not taught micro expressions as the primary method, is for exactly that reason. You don't know what the other person's perspective of this experience is. Are they nervous because they're intimidated by you? Are they excited because you pose some kind of unique opportunity for them? Are they just feeling sick because they just got over a virus or they had a bad, cupcake at lunch? You have no idea where they're coming from. So the last thing you can do is start to assume that their behavior is an indication of fabrication. Instead, what you need to do is understand that their behavior is just one data point of multiple data points that can lead to an assessment about whether or not they're being truthful and honest with you. My children are young. I have an 11-year-old son and a 6-year-old daughter. My son will oftentimes tell me something that isn't true. He's not trying to lie to me. He is honestly representing what he believes is the truth. He doesn't remember when I told him to brush his teeth after dinner. I told him that. He looked in my face and said, I'll brush my teeth. But in his brain, he was thinking about 9 other things because he's 11 years old. And as soon as he walked up the stairs, brushing his teeth fell off the top of the list, and checking his email or looking at his phone or drawing a new picture, something else took that first place spot. It's easy as a parent that you want to assume your child was lying to you when they said they would brush their teeth, when in reality, their brain is just moving at a faster pace than their level of commitment. The same thing is true for adults, because as much as we may not want to accept it, a 45-year-old man is really just a 13-year-old boy in a 45-year-old body. And depending on how much training and exercise and maturity that 45-year-old man has gone through, he may not be much more mature than the prepubescent child that was.
I've heard you talk about the difference between like how to spot a good liar versus a bad liar. I mean, I would love for you to explain that because I think the audience would get a lot of value out of it.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that's interesting, right? Because you have to consider a good liar versus a bad liar, but you also have to consider a trained liar against an untrained liar. Because you can be a bad liar who is trained, or you can be a good liar who is untrained. So when it comes to these people who are using deception, you have to be open to 2 different types, right? So I think a bad liar is a good place to start. Somebody who is a bad liar can't keep their facts straight. So they can't remember the lie that they just said 5 minutes ago. So they said that they would be there at 3:00. You asked what time they're coming over, and they said, how about 4:00? I mean, it's easy to find a bad liar. If anything, bad liars give us all a false sense of security about how good we are at lie detection. So bad liars are fairly easy to find. They can't keep their facts straight. They physically show that they're nervous or uncomfortable during a conversation. They are very divergent from baseline. So if your bad liar is a friend or a brother or a sibling or a coworker, you know how different they behave when they're lying. So a bad liar is easy. A good liar is a little bit more difficult because a good liar means that they are naturally proficient at deception. And for the most part, when people are naturally proficient at deception, it's because they grew up in an environment where deception was part of their survival, right? So they grew up in a family that was abusive, or they grew up in a traumatic childhood, or they grew up in a place where deception was required for success. So you're talking about somebody who from the age of 9, 10, 11 years old has been actively exercising and learning from the school of hard knocks how to tell effective lies. So a good liar is a much harder person to crack. And it becomes very, very important that you learn the skills of elicitation, you learn the skills of measuring baseline, you learn how to keep your own facts straight, your own solid memory palace, if you will, so that you can test a good liar against the mistakes that they will for sure make. Because a good liar will still make mistakes. They will just make fewer mistakes than a bad liar. So you have to actively engage someone that you suspect is a good liar because they're good, but they're not necessarily trained. So now we have to make the flip to the trained versus untrained liar, right? Your untrained liar can be either good or bad. But here's what's important. An untrained liar always makes mistakes. That's because they're untrained. So they're not prepared. They're usually lying in a reactive method, which means they haven't thought their lie through. They know that they're going to be dishonest, but they don't know exactly how they're going to be dishonest. So they go into something kind of winging it. So that's why they make mistakes. If they're good, they make less mistakes, but they still make mistakes. If they're bad, they make lots of mistakes and they're caught. So an untrained liar is easier to find, easier to crack than a good liar, but not as easy to crack as a bad, untrained liar. So now you've got your perfect combination of bad scenario is a good trained liar. And really, when you're dealing with a good trained liar, somebody who's naturally inclined to lie and trained in how to lie, your best opportunity is to identify the fact that this person's story is too tight. Their behavior is too confident. Their level of accuracy is too accurate. Because here's the truth. When someone's telling you the truth takes no effort. So when you and I are having a conversation, I'm telling you the truth, it's easy for us to have that conversation. I can actually multitask in my brain. I can be thinking about dinner with my kids. I can be thinking about my next business meeting at the same time that I'm having a conversation with you where I'm being honest. So it doesn't take a great deal of effort to be honest. But when you're with someone who is a good trained liar, one of the big telltale signs that they are lying is that you see a great deal of focus and a great deal of effort that goes into the fact that they're telling you what seems like the truth. They are not making mistakes. They're not varying much from their baseline, but you can see that they're putting a lot of effort into this conversation. That is a very good sign that you're dealing with somebody who is a trained and natural or good liar. That was, again, a lot of conversation there to go through those 4 different options, Doug. Is there any one of those that you want to dig into more? Did that kind of capture what you were looking for?